All right, hello everybody. I'd like to ask you please, before I get started, if you'd silence your phones. I'd much appreciate that. Thank you for coming today. Many friends and relatives are here. I trust there are veterans and other historians amongst the group, so let me say up front that I hope this presentation honors all of you here, and especially the memory of the two men who are the subject of it. Naturally, I want to include a thank you to my advisor in love, Lisa, who has been very helpful managing the technology of this, and to Mike Fenzel and Jennifer Lyons and the rest of the Fountain Hills Community Center for sponsoring this event. My name is Tim Yoder, and Fountain Hills has been my home for nearly 47 years. I've been a historian all of my life. I'm a retired U.S. history teacher with a degree in German literature, and today I help local residents maintain their homes. This is a story about my family, typical, everyday Americans. It's a story about two of my great uncles, one from each side of the family, who both served the United States in General George S. Patton's 3rd Army 75 years ago in the Battle of the Bulge. For the United States, the Battle of the Bulge was the largest and bloodiest engagement of World War II, and it was the 3rd deadliest campaign in nearly 250 years of American history. Colonel Glenn Roswell Weikert was born in Lima, Ohio in 1904. He lived nearby in Springfield, Ohio, and later died in Lima in 1968, almost 52 years ago. Known as Roswell to friends and family, he was a graduate of Wittenberg College. He worked for International Harvester and served as an officer in the renowned 94th Infantry Division. Uncle Roswell is my great uncle. His younger sister is my grandmother, Dorothy Yoder. Both Roswell and his parents, with whom he lived and for whom he did caretaking late in life, died in the 1960s. The letters that he had written to them during his service in World War II were passed on to my grandmother, who dutifully saved them. Those letters came into my possession when she died about 10 years ago. And now we're presenting them to you. This story is driven by those 17 letters and one document. The goal of this presentation is to share 10 of the letters, well, 11. Actually, I'm going to pass one around. Written from his training site in Mississippi on board the Queen Mary on his way to England, in England, France, and the Luxembourg area during this infamous time. These letters were written by a mature, accomplished businessman and leader who served his country honorably, leading men in the chaotic world of 75 years ago. In considering these letters, I realized and confirmed a second great uncle also served under General Patton in the Battle of the Bulge. So while keeping the focus on these letters, Uncle Roswell to his parents, I will occasionally draw in a reference to Private Paul Phillips, the great uncle from my mother's side of the family. His sister is my grandmother, Margie Prather. Through Colonel Glenn Roswell Weikert's letters, and with the help of an archivist in Wisconsin and a researcher in California, Fountain Hills veterans and my family, Colonel Weikert and Private Phillips are not forgotten. In the end, this presentation has been done to honor my uncles, to honor their parents, and to honor all of the veterans of our fight to wrest Republican democracies from the jaws of totalitarian fascists who, if not for these American men and women of ours, nearly destroyed liberty across the globe. This is for family. This is for all of those who love this great nation and our wondrous past. So enough about why I did this. Glenn Roswell Weikert was the oldest of 4 children, Roswell, Paul, Wilson, and my grandmother Dorothy, to Glenn and Harriet Weikert. and so it may be fair to say that he was my grandmother's favorite brother. After getting his degree in the late 1920s, he secured a position with International Harvester, a massive international farm machinery manufacturer. Since Uncle Roswell left no heirs who knew about his work before the war, we reached out to an archivist in Wisconsin at the University in Madison, where all International Harvester records and archives are housed. Wanting to understand a bit more about the professional Glenn Roswell Weikert to see if his work had any bearing on his service in the U.S. Army, and unbelievably, the archivist found Uncle Roswell referenced in 2 different International Harvester industry magazines. We learned that for International Harvester's Springfield, Ohio Truck Works plant, where they built trucks under the International brand, Uncle Roswell was in charge of material handling and industrial safety. He wrote the piece above. This professional background certainly played a perfect role in his future placement commanding an ordnance company for the U.S. Army, which I will speak a bit more about in a minute. On the social page of one of International Harvester's magazine's September 1941 issue, just a few months before we entered World War II, Uncle Roswell is quoted in regards to his plans for an upcoming vacation in Sarasota Springs, New York. He planned on watching horse races and eating spaghetti. You will see that his interest in horses didn't wane even in the midst of fighting the Germans in France. In the summer of 1942, Roswell joined the U.S. Army as a major. He was 38 years old. In May of 1943, Major Weikert was transferred from his 12th Armored Division training location to Camp McCain, Mississippi. There he joined the 94th Infantry Division as a commanding officer of the Ordnance Company. This is the 94th's own publication announcing Major Weikert's background and transfer to the 94th, which is on the whole left column there. The 794th Ordnance Company was a light maintenance ordnance company. Light maintenance ordnance companies were responsible for supplying and maintaining all light vehicles, such as jeeps, light trucks, and motorcycles, weapons, such as cannons and small arms, and ammunition. They also served in many other necessary functions as needed. Mechanics and technicians, drivers and equipment operators set up workshops and depots in the field, sometimes under dire circumstances, supplying, rebuilding, and repairing damaged material, and returning it to the field as quickly as possible for the safety and survival of the soldiers in the field. In the 400-plus page history of the 94th Infantry in World War II, their commanding officer, Major General Maloney, wrote in the introduction about these companies, which are called supporting arms. General Maloney wrote, "It may seem to many of you that the volume concentrates on the accomplishments of the infantry to a certain degree of exclusion of the supporting arms. Still, you must remember that the accomplishments of the artillery, engineer, signal, medical, ordnance, and other units are measured in the progress of the infantry. In other words, the infantry can do very little without the help of the supporting arms." At the end of May 1944, we get our first document, a commendation earned by Uncle Roswell while training at Camp McCain in Mississippi. It is very unusual to get a commendation during training, and I will read it. 30th of May 1944, subject commendation to Major Glenn R. Weikert, commanding officer of the 794th. Through the commanding officer of the Special Troops. Number 1, the commanding general desires to commend you for the outstanding performance of duty displayed during the visit of the Honorable Mr. R.P. Patterson, the Undersecretary of War. Number 2, the manner in which you saw to it that ammunition was at the right place at the right time for the firing problems staged for Mr. Patterson and his party was probably standard operating procedure for you and your highly coordinated outfit. But your efficiency was something which could not go unnoticed and reflects credibility upon you and the 94th Division by command of General Maloney. E.C. Berquist, Colonel. It was a commendation earned while at Camp McCain, as I said. President Roosevelt's Undersecretary of War, Mr. R.P. Patterson, was a guest of honor at Camp McCain when the 94th demonstrated assault and defense capabilities. The next month, the 94th Division was awarded the first Expert Infantry Division in the U.S. Army. It was a new, highly esteemed training recognition. For those who are wondering what a World War II infantry division is, a typical infantry division has 10,000 to 15,000 personnel. So Fountain Hills would be roughly 2 divisions worth. 60% or more of the divisions are infantry soldiers, but as I alluded to a minute ago, within a division are also ordnance companies, engineer battalions, medical battalions, artillery battalions, a counterintelligence corps, and special troops such as military police platoon, a band, and of course a headquarters company. In very early August, the 94th Division departed Camp Shanks, New York, near the mouth of the Hudson River, on board the Queen Mary, bound for England. On board the ship, Major Weikert wrote a letter to his parents. August 10th, 1944, still at sea. Dear Dad and Mommy, just a note. Not much to tell except the trip is wonderful and beautiful. Wish I had been a sailor. Sure bet you two would love an ocean trip. The sunsets and sunrises are gorgeous. Have seen porpoise, flying fish, and a couple of sharks. My luck has gone sour at poker. They are about even with me just now. Colonel McLaughlin has had a bad cold but is feeling lots better. His room is just across the gangway from mine. The boys from the band put on a show the other evening. It was swell. Remember the 2 who played the piano? They were at their best, especially on the boogie-woogie numbers. Well, be good and write often. Pass these notes around as I don't have much time to write. Love to all. Worlds of love to you both. Roswell. The next month, the 94th Division was awarded... Here's a hard-to-believe fact about the Queen Mary. A fact pertaining to her service in World War II, which I learned while researching this. The Queen Mary was retrofitted as a troop transport ship for the war. She could simply outrun the German submarines that were trying to hunt her down. On one voyage in July 1943, the Queen Mary set a record that stands yet today for the most people transported on any ship in a single voyage. Including the crew, it was over 16,000 human beings. On their way into war, I think it's lovely to hear Uncle Roswell write about sailing, the ocean life, wishes for his parents, his recent run of bad luck at poker, and the concert with the boogie-woogie numbers. Uncle Roswell wrote 6 letters to his parents while in England for the month. The writing was very prolific while readying to land in France. He was very attracted to England, the working horses, the foliage, the scenery such as ancient castles, and he made note of the large numbers of women working the farms in one letter. Major Weikert and all other soldiers and airmen would not have been permitted to give their locations, but we know now that they were temporarily posted in and around Chippenham, England, about 80 miles directly west of London. In the interest of time, we can only present this letter from his time in England. You may appreciate how he writes of his sense of duty in the great struggle in World War II. "29th of August, 1944, somewhere in England, my birthday. Dear Mommy and Dad, well, who would have ever thought 40 years ago tonight I would be writing a letter from across the ocean? Now listen, both of you dears, please don't ever worry about me. I'm not afraid of this business. In fact, I'm really glad I'm here. We all have a job to do. This is my part of it, and I'm really happy with my work. Always something to do, lots of work. Long, hard hours, but we don't mind any of it. Several times today I have thought, well, now you are 40 years old, getting old. No, I don't feel old at all. Colonel Turner is here writing to his mother. He and I live together, have a hut, all our own. Only lieutenant colonels have separate huts. What fairs have you attended? I have seen some very fine horses over here, all kinds, hackneys, Welsh ponies, hunters, jumpers, and heavy work horses. Well, now be good, write lots and often, love to all the family, worlds of love to both of you, and a kiss, Roswell." The subject of cattle and horses, his work and fellow officers, the exchange of mail and gifts to and from home, and his commitment to the Army and the cause will come around again. You will see. About 1 week prior to writing that letter, Major Weikert received a promotion to Lieutenant Colonel. Most of the letters in this collection are so-called V-mail letters, V for victory. The one being passed around now is actual size with its corresponding envelope. The form was basically an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper that the sender would write on and send out. Government mail centers would intercept the letters, photograph it to a microfiche negative size image, and then destroy the original. The negative roll of dozens or hundreds of letters would then be shipped or flown to the appropriate theater or to the United States in the case of letters being sent by servicemen and women who were overseas, and a processing center would re-image the letters from the negative into that very small economical format. That small form is what would arrive in the mailbox at your home. The ingenious system of V-mail saved millions of dollars in transportation costs, fuel, and space. The V-mail circulating the room, starting in the back there now, from the 27th of August 1944 has been blown up for ease of reading. In it, Roswell mentions to his parents that a promotion came through with an important comment about getting a personal congratulatory phone call from General Louis Fortier. General Fortier was the commanding general for artillery for the 94th Infantry Division. In 1945, Fortier was among the first American soldiers to cross the Rhine River. I'm sure he would have done that with General Patton. At the end of the war, Fortier joined the Military Staff Committee of the United States and served as Assistant Director for the Central Intelligence Group, which was the forerunner to the CIA. My great-uncle was definitely rubbing elbows with power brokers. In very many of his letters, Roswell asks his parents about the fairs in and around Springfield, Ohio, where his wife, Vita, resided and where his parents lived. County and state fairs were an important source of entertainment and business before the birth of television and computers. and Uncle Roswell's father, my great-grandfather, was a respected and well-recognized farm and estate auctioneer throughout the region at the time. Selling cattle and horses and being in the farming business with International Harvester was simply a way of life for father and son. Here you see a brand new sheet of current U.S. postage stamps celebrating that world. It celebrates the cultural importance of fairs to America. On September the 8th, 1944, the 94th Infantry Division landed on Utah Beach in Normandy, France. Arriving at Utah Beach on the very same day was the tough 26th Infantry Division, known as the Yankee Division. The 26th arrival at Utah Beach was pretty unusual up to that point. They had taken a troop transport directly from the east coast of the United States and landed in Normandy directly, bypassing England altogether. Private Paul Phillips, my other great uncle, a rifleman in the 328th Regiment of the 26th Infantry Division, was there. Uncle Paul came from a very humble area of subsistence farming and coal mining in eastern Kentucky, in Appalachia. He had just turned 23 years old. To me, the fact that an uncle from each side of my family, guided by circumstance, coincidence, and perhaps fate, landed on the same shoreline of France on the exact same day, D-Day plus 94, makes this story worth telling. If they ever met one another, they had a chance at my parents' wedding about 20 years after the war. Lieutenant Colonel Weikert's 94th Division went to action in Brittany, the northwesternmost region of France, around Lorient and Saint-Nazaire. Their assignment was to keep about 60,000 German troops in the area contained. As the commander of his ordnance company, however, Lieutenant Colonel Weikert traveled extensively in his command car, coordinating with numerous subordinates and other company commanders and the French in order to procure and secure the necessary fuel, parts, and supplies in the field, which would help keep pressure on those 60,000 Germans. And I'm going to diverge from this real quickly here. I learned something that really blew me away. And I've been reading about World War II since I was a child. I did not know, and perhaps you don't either, that when the Germans surrendered in early May of 1945, on that day, they still controlled, to what I read, all of the ports of France and Holland, except for Antwerp. So we just bypassed them and went on, but anyway. The following letter to his parents is from mid-October. Roswell was working to give his parents information that they could relate to. Somewhere in France, 16th of October, 1944, dear Dad and Mommy. It has been several days since I have been able to write, as usual. I have been terribly busy. We have been traveling most all of the time, which has made it impossible to write. I have sent 2 boxes of souvenirs from France, which I want divided among the family as gifts. Naturally, shopping is somewhat of a problem here, and the articles mailed must serve as Christmas gifts. From time to time, I will send packages home, distribute them as you see fit. From the addresses I have been getting lately, I believe my old outfit is somewhere here in France. However, I have been unable to contact any of them so far. Lately, the mail service has been fairly good. I have received mail from Wilson, Dorothy, Paul, Mo Sanders, and 2 letters from you. In the near future, I will try to answer all of them. From the letters I have had lately, it seems that you have been doing a lot of traveling, which leads me to believe that business is very good. How are the sales going? Here in France, most of the cattle are Holstein. Also, I have seen a few Jerseys, some of which are used as oxen. In fact, There are several sections of the country which I have visited where oxen are used more extensively than horses. There are a lot of good horses in this country, most of them being sorrels weighing from 1,400 to 1,600 pounds. I understand that they are artillery horses left by the Germans. Many of them are exactly the same type as Babe. All wagons and buggies here are two-wheeled. Since been in France, I have seen one horse vehicle with 4 wheels. Also, I have not seen one team of horses hitched abreast. They are always hitched in tandem. Naturally, oxen are yoked abreast, but when horses are used for plowing or pulling heavy loads on the roads, they are hitched 2 or 3 in tandem. I have seen several canal boats, horse-drawn, which brings back memories of Troy, Piqua, the Culbertson farm, and the doghouse at Troy. You will remember the doghouse started from the watchman's shanty over the old canal. I could ramble like this for hours, but space and time limit me. Be good, write as often as possible, and I will try to do the same. Worlds of love and a kiss for each. Roswell. At the same time Roswell wrote that letter, Uncle Paul, the rifleman, and his Yankee division were attaching to General Patton's 3rd Army. The 26th Infantry spent the month of September in and around St. Lo in the proximity of Normandy that I hope you can see on the map, on the left side area. Training and preparing they were to move to the front a few hundred miles to their east. By mid-October, the 26th Division had made their way to Nancy, France. In order to get the news of his whereabouts to his parents past the censors who read all the letters from servicemen, Uncle Paul wrote a letter referring to and asking about his Aunt Nancy. There was no Nancy in our family. The family deduced where their boy was. Private Paul Phillips and his 328th Regiment were about to become part of the front line of Patton's army. Things were going to get very difficult as they charged into the enemy. On November the 9th, Lieutenant Colonel Weikert wrote again. The 94th Infantry were still in a containment role against 60,000 German defenders of France's western ports in Brittany, roughly 550 miles to the west of the Yankee Division. Lieutenant Colonel Weikert's 794th Ordnance Company was posted in Chateaubriand, behind the lines surrounding the port cities of Lorient and Saint-Nazaire, which the Germans controlled but could not properly utilize. Read letters 13 and 14 back to back. 9th of November 1944, somewhere in France. Dear Dad and Mommy, has been several days now since I have been able to write, traveling as usual. Have spent so many hours in the car, it seems funny to walk again. Hope that we stay here for a few days so I can get some rest. Weather here is lousy. Has rained almost every day for the past month or 6 weeks. Have collected a few more souvenirs which I hope to get mailed home in a day or two. Quite some time ago, Vita, his wife, said that she had mailed a package. You also said you had mailed one. Well, so far they have not arrived. When they do, I sure hope there are some peanuts. Can't get them over here. So far have not met anyone I knew back home, but I have heard from an officer in Paris who was with me back in the States. I hope to see him soon. Sure glad to hear you enjoyed your visit with Vita, Nina, and Rose. They really stick together, don't they? Now don't worry a minute about me. I'm feeling grand, getting plenty to eat, and so far able to keep warm. Be good and write soon. Worlds of love to all. Roswell.
Still in France, December 13th, 1944. Dear Dad and Mommy, have caught a little cold, so we'll stay in today and try to do some writing. As usual, am behind on my correspondence. We received quite a little mail yesterday. First for several days. Letters from you all, Vita and her sister Ann, Helen and Glenn Stafford, Dottie, one from Texas, International Harvester Corporation magazine. Now a few answers to questions. No peanuts yet. Please send some. Only one copy of the Springfield paper in the last 7 weeks. Sure would like to get it. No doubt the Christmas rush has a lot of second-class mail held up. Would also like some Propert's saddle soap for my boots. Also could use a cigarette lighter if possible to secure one. I have lost 2 good ones over here that I got in New York. Suppose you are having some snow now. None here, although it is quite cold and very damp. Although we are still awfully busy, my traveling has temporarily slowed up a bit, for which I am very thankful. Well, I now have Christmas boxes from everyone but Vita. Again, please thank all for the lovely things sent. If possible, I'll have a small Christmas tree in the tent with a few candles, etc. We'll make it seem more like the real thing. Be good now, and write lots and often. Worlds of love to both, and kisses. Roswell. From mid-October until that last letter's date of December the 13th, Private Paul Phillips and his fellow soldiers had been on the move to the east of Nancy.
He and the 26th had been fighting their way through the 40 or 60 miles between Nancy, France, and the German border to the east. The combat in some of the towns and villages was brutal. It was at times hand-to-hand. The morning reports from his 328th Infantry Regiment, the status reports that each unit filled out every morning, recorded a daily loss of one or several U.S. servicemen in his regiment, killed or wounded, every day. The history of the 26th Infantry Division states that on December 11th, a company of the 328th were on patrol and entered German territory, the first Americans to cross into German territory in World War II. It happened near the small village of Obergeilbach, which sits on the French-German border. So we were in Obergeilbach, sent a patrol across. Within a handful of days of entering Germany on that patrol, the Yankee Division pulled back to Metz, France, just north of Nancy. They needed reinforcements. They needed to train those reinforcements, and they needed a bit of R&R as a result of the previous 60 days of combat. Sadly, they did not get more than about 24 hours of rest before being called back into action. On December the 16th, 1944, a tremendous fighting force of German troops and tanks attacked the Allied lines in a desperate counteroffensive centered primarily in the Ardennes forest of eastern Belgium and extending southward into the northern half of Luxembourg. Referred to as the Ardennes Offensive, it covered a total area of about the size of the state of Connecticut. This Nazi counteroffensive was planned to coincide with the onset of a terrible freezing and snowy winter. The month-long battle became known as the Battle of the Bulge because the intrusion of German tanks and soldiers created a bulge in the Allied lines. The term salient is used in the military world to describe the same thing. It means a bulge in the front lines created by the intrusion of the enemy. By the time the battle was over, 1 million Allied soldiers and airmen had taken part in it. On December the 20th, 4 days into the Ardennes offensive, Private Paul Phillips and the 26th Infantry were hurriedly moving into treacherous and contested terrain in western Luxembourg, not far north of the town of Arlon, Belgium. While making their way toward Bastogne to aid the surrounded 101st Airborne Division, on point for Company F, the 328th Regiment, and laden with his 80 or 90 pounds of pack, which included weapon, ammunition, and his gear, Private Phillips stepped on a German landmine. The Germans nearby took him for dead and left him in the snow. Shortly thereafter, Private Phillips was retrieved by fellow soldiers and evacuated to a field hospital and eventually evacuated to England. If not for the new wonder drug of penicillin and 6 months of recuperation in the hospital, his foot, or perhaps more, could have been lost. What would become known as the Battle of the Bulge was 4 days old, and Uncle Paul was a casualty. General Patton was down another good man, and as you can see from the morning report right here, Private Paul Phillips wasn't the only one in the 328th who was injured that day. Spanning the month-long Battle of the Bulge, General George Patton commanded many infantry divisions and some artillery divisions and an airborne division that were directly involved in the fighting of the Battle of the Bulge. But he had other divisions to the south which were engaging the enemy in other fighting. If you can see the green box in the map, it might not seem to be in close proximity to the Bulge. In real distance, however, the difference between Patton's men in Bastogne and his men breaking into the German border to the south, where you see the green box, is a tad more than the distance from far east Metro Phoenix in Apache Junction to far west Phoenix in Buckeye. 11 days after Uncle Paul was wounded, Uncle Roswell's 94th Division was assigned to General George S. Patton's Third Army. The 94th attacked the Germans just south of Luxembourg. See the green box? In an area vacated by some of Third Army's forces when they turned northward into Belgium to repel the German advance. Here is a letter written only a few days after Christmas, just before attaching to the Third Army. Dearest Dad and Mommy, well, here 'tis past Christmas and nearly another year gone. Just wonder where we will all be 1 year from now. Have been on the road almost continually lately. Was lucky enough to spend 3 days in Paris on one of my trips. That is certainly a beautiful city. Almost impossible to describe the beauty, so we'll send some views in my next box. Saw 3 good shows and heard some very good music also. It really is a treat to get away from the old grind once in a while. Our mail has been pretty scarce lately. None of my peanuts have arrived yet. Please send some. Also, if possible, some candy, cigarettes, and Propert's saddle soap and toilet soap. The Sunday papers have started to come in. Have had several of them lately and sure enjoy reading them when I have time. Has been quite cold lately, but we are still comfortable and have plenty to eat. Have had a little cold, but otherwise fine. Now be good, all of you, write often. Regards to all of my friends and love to the family. Worlds of love and kisses, Roswell. The 9th of January, 1945. Dear Dad and Mommy and all, well, we have been on the move now for over 2 weeks. Believe we'll get a couple of days rest just now, which we all need. No, that wasn't going to happen. The weather here has been very cold and plenty of snow. I'm very thankful for good, warm U.S. Army clothes and equipment. Before I forget, you asked what the ribbon with gold lettering was. That is a hat band for German Marines. The insignias are all German, and by the way, this paper I'm writing on is German. All this and lots more was Army stuff that we captured from them. They do have some very excellent equipment and know how to use it also. Has been quite a spell now since I've heard from any of you. Guess the kids are all sore at me because I don't write them, but this is the second letter I've been able to write in days and days. We'll gradually catch up, and in the meantime, all of you keep writing. Please do, because letters help so much when they finally do catch up with us. Also, if possible to get, I would sure appreciate some cigarettes, candy, peanuts, a couple of cakes of toilet soap, and some more 4711 eau de cologne. It is almost impossible to get these articles where we are now, and especially hard for me, as I have to move around so much. By the way, I've heard that my old outfit is somewhere nearby, so I'm looking forward to seeing Colonel Ward, Dick Rostetter, and all that gang before long. Saw Colonels Turner, McLaughlin, and Woodward today. Woodward was made Lieutenant Colonel just a while back. They all asked me to say hello to you while I write. Have not been able to locate Bittner Brown. There are so many Browns, the Army is lousy with them. I never cared a lot for him, but if you will let me have his Army address, I might be able to locate him. Since leaving England, I haven't run into anyone from Springfield. How are the sales and real estate deals going? Please keep the ball rolling and save your money. I'll probably need some when I get back. Things are so terribly expensive here. Our money don't last long, although lately there has been little to no chance to spend any. You asked once what LM in my address meant. It stands for light maintenance. Ordnance maintenance companies are of three classes: light, medium auto maintenance, and heavy auto or artillery maintenance. I always destroy my letters and generally have to answer the questions from memory. And now that I've passed the old 40th milestone, I find that the old noggin is not as sharp as it once was. If any of you are 40 yet, you know. Well, I have the tent warm now. I hooked a little stove the other day, so we'll pile in for a few hours sleep if they don't call me out for something. So be good, all of you. Write when you can. Regards to all my friends and love to all the family. To you, Dad and Mommy. All the love in the world and a kiss for each. Roswell. P.S. Glad you got to see Marie Fogel. She was a swell kid and really crazy about me. Tell her I send my love. That always stays them. P.S. New Year's Eve was just like Christmas. Just another day of the week. Work and more work. Where's my paper? No.
Page 14.
Next week I'm doing this all by memory. An interesting point pertaining to Uncle Roswell's request for 4711 eau de cologne. I wonder if the irony escaped him and his parents, or if he was giving them some inside hints as to the wartime developments and goals. But eau de cologne 4711, Echt Kölnischwasser, is a German product made since at least 1799, with the same formula for more than 200 years. Strange to think about asking for a German product during a time in which America had for years not imported consumer goods from Germany. Either way, it is evident that he and his parents were familiar with the product, and I invite you to travel back in time to both Springfield, Ohio, and Cologne, Germany by giving the bottle of 4711 a little sniff later. It's on the back table over there. Maybe. Between January 1st in 1945 and the letter of January the 9th that I just read, the roughly 12,000 men of the 94th moved from Brittany across France to the east in order to take on the Germans at their border with France. Lieutenant Colonel Weikert's 794th Ordnance Company set up their operations base in Elzange, France, 15 or 20 miles north of Metz, about a 20-minute drive from the German border. By January the 5th, the 94th was on a new front with the goal to push hard against Germany. One objective for Patton's many divisions, which were not directly involved in the battling in the Ardennes forest, was to fight the enemy just south of the Bulge, to break into Germany, thereby forcing a change in German strategy, forcing them to abandon hope in Belgium, and indeed to force them to abandon Belgium. Heralding from Massachusetts, the 26th Infantry Division was nicknamed the Yankee Division. The 94th Division was nicknamed Patton's Golden Nugget. The 94th had had some time and experience under their belt for their service in Brittany, but the 94th was essentially at full strength and fresh for the fight, as they say. They were very well trained, organized, and relatively rested, ready, valued like a golden nugget. The Germans, however, are known to have referred to the 94th as Roosevelt's Butchers. The history behind that propagandistic name, Roosevelt's Butchers, is worth noting. From the 15th through the 17th of January 1945, the 94th Infantry engaged the enemy in terribly difficult fighting in and around the towns of Nannig and Tettingen, Germany, about 18 miles from the 794th Light Maintenance Ordnance Company posted in Elzange. It had been snowing, icy, and freezing for a month. Combat was vicious and back and forth over the terrain in those little villages. Our Americans would take territory from the enemy only to lose it again half a day later, and the cycle would repeat. There were many dozens of dead from both sides, frozen solid on frozen ground. After taking ground from the Germans, our servicemen went about their usual duties of preparing the dead for burial, stacking the frozen bodies along the roads and in abandoned buildings to await an opportunity to bury them. A counterattack by the enemy forced the men of the 94th to fall back and abandon their positions, and so the Germans found their own, stacked like cordwood in the freezing. Axis Sally, the equivalent radio propagandist to the Japanese Tokyo Rose, took that news to spread negative propaganda about the American forces, no doubt to elicit rage within the German population. Roosevelt's butchers are on our doorstep. Listen to what they have done to our sons. Uncle Roswell alludes to the very ugly and difficult situation in which they find themselves in his next post to his parents. Battling, freezing, he's still a little sick, and there's some insubordination, or better, theft, from his aide. Surrounded by misery and machines, yet he also finds a sentence to mention a beautiful place. Still in France, 23rd of January, 1945. Dearest Dad and Mommy, just a note, we are now permitted to say we are in the 3rd U.S. Army, so you can follow us a little closer now. Just now the going is plenty rough, too. Lots of action. Too much work in lousy cold weather. Is snowing like blazes again tonight. I am feeling fine except have been bothered with bull hives. Remember, I had them about 1929 or 1930. The doctors say it comes from fruit juices and tomato juice, of which we have had a lot just lately. And oh yes, I've been having trouble with my orderly, my maid. He lost 2 good pair of my shoes on our last move, also a good pair of gloves, and I caught him with a pair of my socks and pants on yesterday. He will be very busy in the next few days now shoveling snow. I should make it do it in his bare feet. As usual, have been on the road almost continually for days. We must ride with the tops down too. Made 3 trips to Luxembourg, a most beautiful place. Must sign off now and hit the hay. Be good, write lots and soon. Love to all the family. Worlds of love and a kiss. Roswell. A note on the subject of doing research. It is extremely difficult to find information on so-called bull hives. One newspaper from the 1800s, which I found online, makes note of them in an illness reported on a woman in Chicago. But hives on pit bull terriers is one of the predominant Google results if one searches bull hives. With a bit of detective work, I believe they are simply hives in the shape of a bullseye. Bull hives. This next letter is second to last and was written a few days after the Battle of the Bulge. American forces successfully repelled the enemy and our efforts turned more offensive rather than defensive. Engage and crush the enemy and cross the Rhine River. At the time, there was hope of capturing Berlin. Germany was 4 months from surrender. Early on, Roswell mentions the quantity and difficulty of the work. Then a horse he'd seen in a collier's magazine reminded him of home and his brother Wilson, whose house had burned down in Springfield. He speaks about good news and that has arrived from home, and then concerns himself with his dad's world. January 1945. Dear Dad and Mommy, well, looks as if we might get a day or 2 of much needed rest. Really been on the ball again for quite a spell. Weather here continues to be just plain lousy. Still plenty of snow, ice, and last night a cold freezing rain. My driver and I traveled about 40 miles in it, mostly blackout. Had no curtains on the car and had to stop several times so he could warm his face. Was looking through an old Collier's a while ago and saw a picture of a racehorse, which suddenly made me realize that all of my junk was at Wilson's. Suppose it is all gone now. Well, that was nothing compared to what the kids lost. By the way, how are they getting along and how is the building progressing? What type of house will they build? The peanuts have arrived. 1 box with 4 pounds. Also, 1 box from Vita. In fact, I'm eating some of them now. The first you sent must have been lost. Can use some more. Also a little candy and some cigarettes. Guess I told you I had a radio we got off the Heinies. Sure is lots of company when we have time to get set up and start our generators to run it. Well, be good, all of you. Hope your teeth don't bother you too much, Dad. Get your radio and player fixed. That locksmith in the arcade could make it the broken part for you. Love and kisses, Roswell. I missed the part about his insubordination. I don't know where that is. Let me backtrack one. Oh no, I got that. Okay. February 6, 1945 is the date of the last letter, the final letter. Uncle Roswell served the entirety of the war and in post-war Czechoslovakia. He also served in Korea some years later, but any other letters are lost to time. The men of the 94th were inside the current German border, fiercely battling the Germans in the areas of Bonholzwood, Budsdorf, and Zins, only a couple of miles from where they had been weeks earlier. For reference as to the fierceness, a single field artillery battalion, the 356th, fired 6,965 rounds of that 105 millimeter ammunition in a 72-hour period during the week of February the 6th. Close to 100 cannon rounds per hour from their cannons for 72 straight hours. And if I am not mistaken, an artillery battalion would have roughly 12 cannons attached to them. Dearest Dad and Mommy, well, the cold wave here has let up, but now we have floods and mud to contend with. And with all our vehicles, it's really a job trying to keep them all going. Just now we are in a sea of mud. Sure we'll be glad when spring comes with warmer, drier weather. Wonder if you ever see anything about us in the papers. Several of the men have received clippings from newspapers telling about our division. Have received several Sunday papers just lately, and one was from November and two were from early December. Guess I told you we had a whole bunch of old mail the other day, way back into November. No matter how old, we sure were glad to get it. By the way, the package with the lighter has not arrived yet. Probably will roll in any day now. Have sent a couple of packages of souvenirs lately. These last I should like you to keep for me. One contains 2 candle lanterns, brass, from one of the famous fortresses I have been in. My Heine radio has been working swell. Most beautiful music tonight, mostly from America. After midnight. Probably a rebroadcast from England. Did I tell you I wrecked my sedan? Left it in a village way back. Am just as glad, though, as I had been having lots of trouble with it. Guess the Heinies had worn it about out when I got the thing. It was real classy, though, and fast as lightning. So now I'm riding in my old dependable command car. Had a nice letter from Mo Sanders today. Says his son is over here someplace in the infantry. Well, my choice of them all is the infantry. But it's no bed of roses, believe me. How is the real estate racket? And how are sales holding up? Haven't seen or heard of an auction since I left the States. But there is very little left to sell over here. Poor people, I feel so sorry for them, especially during the winter. No homes, very little to eat, hardly any fuel and clothes. No matter how hard this war has hit the good old USA from a manpower angle, they have had that great loss over here too. You should all thank God the battlefields of this war have been so far distant. See by the news Sunday that Everett Hopkins was promoted. My congratulations to him. What does Thelma have here from her brother? Is he still in the Pacific area? Haven't heard from Paul or Wilson for a long time. Believe I wrote to them last too, which is really good for me. Well, so much for tonight. Must be up and going before daylight, so it better hit the sack. Be good, all of you. Write lots and often. Regards to all my friends and love to all the family. To both of you, worlds of love and a kiss for each. Roswell. Lieutenant Colonel Weikert's comments as to the importance of letters and mail His reflection on and admiration of the courage and nobility of the infantry, and his unending interest in friends and family back in the good old USA are understood by all, and they are powerful. In February, Private Paul Phillips was recovering in a hospital in England, where he'd be for 6 months. They saved his foot, but from 1945 until his passing in 1999, Uncle Paul would have to use his pocket knife to cut a slit in his dress shoes so that his malformed toes and foot could comfortably fit. Lieutenant Colonel Weikert saw the war end against Germany, and he stayed on until about December of '45. He would eventually find himself working again for International Harvester and then returning to service for our nation in the Korean conflict as a colonel. Uncle Roswell died of a heart attack in June of 1968 in Lima, Ohio. Ladies and gentlemen, this winter, right today, is the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge. In the Battle of the Bulge, there were a total of about 89,500 American casualties, killed, wounded, missing, or captured by the enemy. The population of Fountain Hills lost 3 times over in about 37 days. For their service in Europe in World War II, the 94th Infantry Division, Patton's Golden Nugget, suffered 6,533 casualties. 1,009 of them were killed in action. The 26th Infantry, the Yankee Division, suffered 10,701 casualties. 1,850 of them were killed in action. I'm proud of and respect what they did, and I hope that shining a small light on Lieutenant Colonel Weikert's letters provided a different way to look at part of the great history of our nation. A special thanks to anybody here who is a former service member. Letters, documents, and photos is critical to both personal histories, community history, and even national interests. If you have old letters and photos, please find a way to preserve them and protect them. If you wish, I have a few more photos to share with you, and I'll answer any questions you may have too, or I'll try. This is my Uncle Paul's discharge paper from June or July. I can't see it right now, but somewhere in the summer of 1945 from a convalescence hospital in Indiana. It talks about his grade, his ribbons, and his pay, which was he got travel pay of $12.90 to get from Indiana to home in Kentucky, and his total amount, final pay, was $134.43. So, next picture. Searching around, doing research, I'm looking for obituaries, I'm looking for anything, I'm going to grave sites. This is on some website called, I think it's called A Billion Graves, something like that. Here's his headstone. Next picture. That's me with Uncle Roswell. I was close to 1, I think, by that looks of me there, and I turned 1 in June, and he died in June of '68. So I guess that was a lucky shot. Next. This is my Uncle Paul and me here. This is a cousin. This is in Kentucky, in front of, by the way, a very beautiful rose bush, I think it is. And next picture. That's the family, Uncle Paul and his wife and kid. There's Uncle Paul, his wife and kids. There's his wife. That's my dad and mother. And this family. What's next? This is Uncle Roswell and his wife, Vita. They ended up divorcing later. Yes? This is Uncle Roswell. This must have been right after the war. This is Uncle Roswell there with my father, who was born in '43. So you do the math, it had to be somewhere in the 46, 7-ish range at some event. I can't believe my father cannot remember where that was. This is my grandmother Dorothy. This is Roswell Weikert's younger sister. And that's my grandmother Margie Prather, Uncle Paul's sister. And this is my thank yous and some resources I used and that kind of thing. Well, I knew that was going to be close to an hour. If I hadn't dropped the papers, it would have been an hour. So, do you have any questions or anything? Yes, sir?
Where was the convalescence hospital that Uncle Paul was at in Indiana?
I think, from memory, I think it says Wakeman. Do you know where that is?
No.
Wakeman Convalescence Camp, Atterbury, Indiana. It's still there.
Our servicemen that come back from the Far East, or Middle East, they take them to Camp Atterbury to keep press.
Yeah, I guess that's, yep. Fantastic. That's interesting. They still utilize it.
Oh, yeah.
That's great. Yes, sir?
You mentioned about the letters coming back, being filmed and then put back on paper and sent.
Right.
Do you know anything about the reverse letters? Did they do the same thing in Poland there?
Yes and no. In one of the letters that Roswell wrote when he just arrived in England that I bypassed, he tells his parents, send me V-mail letters. They will come more efficiently. And he says, but you have to follow the instructions very specifically. You have to use that government form and stay in it, and then they could get them too. Anything else? Yes, sir?
I noticed that report said in parentheses it was a non-battle injury.
Yes.
Setting on a landmine is non-battle.
Yeah, that's interesting. I learned it too. So the military defines battle as, you know, people are shooting at you and you're shooting at them right then and there, or they're lobbing bombs on you as you are lobbing bombs on them. But that was those landmines are defensive and it was not manned. And when it blew up, I understand the Germans weren't nearby. They didn't come shooting then. All those other guys that were on that same, several of these people also have what they call that non-combat, non-battle wounds. And I'm imagining there might have been one or two of these people also wounded by that same landmine. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do you have a resource for preservation of photos and paper?
Okay, well, I'm pretty good at that stuff. So, first off, you or somebody needs to scan those pictures and get them digitized. Okay, that's the first step. Then the next step is, where's the letter that's going around? Mylar. Mylar envelopes. You can buy them on Google, and they're really great. They're not acidic, and so you get a Mylar envelope. You can get different sizes for different things. This little V-mail letter is in another smaller Mylar envelope within this larger one, and then don't let sunlight and heat and cold get to it. Keep it in the middle of your home somewhere.
But you have a resource for where they could send them if they want to send them to.
Yeah, if you have like what would be expected, if you have 400 photographs that you need digitized, there is a small company down at the corner of Via Linda and 92nd Street. It is close to, what's the name of that bar? The Tavern Bar, right? Or the Tavern Grill. If you know where that is, it's in that same building. and he does transfers. I think it's called DVD transfer station. But he'll transfer anything. Reel-to-reel stuff, photographs, he'll do whatever you need. Yeah. I mean, if you can't get it digitized, at least buy the Mylar packs and organize it. I have been very lucky. I have been able to scan many, many hundreds of photos. And it takes a while, so that's why it's good to have pros do it.
We're lucky to have a pro in our family. He does it for all of us.
Yes, ma'am.
How long did it take you to do all this research?
Well, so I proposed to my partner, do you think this would be a cool thing to do in July? And I felt like it would be. She said she thought it would be. And so I started working then, and I would say, I was thinking about how many hours I've spent. You know, writing takes the most time. But in there, you know, you're trying to decide which direction of the story, what do you want to tell, how. You could tell a million things. You could go in many different directions. So, but I think I've spent, all in all, rewrites, on the phone with people, emails, I don't know, probably close to a couple hundred hours. Yeah. But I'm not good at that, so I gotta go slowly. Yes, ma'am.
Was that really after all the research was done? Another 200 hours to write and organize?
No, that was part of my research and writing altogether, reading and writing and so forth. Some 200 hours, something like that. Weeks and weeks.
Plus about 45 years of studying history.
But I have to tell you, as somebody who knows World War II history better than the average duck, I didn't know anything about, you know, this particular division or that particular division. And I've heard professional historians talk about it. It's such a huge thing. You can't know everything. And people like me, for example, and I'm taking it for granted, like you too, this here is a history story that has never been told by any person before me. And you all have them too, I guess, if you have the resources or the willingness. One of the guys that helped me get that morning report, he's a researcher named Bill Beagle. He's up there, World War II Research Incorporated. He lives in Redondo Beach, California, and he does this full time for the last 20 years. Somebody calls him up, they say, you know, my great-grandpa died in the Navy and fighting the Japanese. I think he was in the Philippines. Here's his ID number. Can you find me something about him? And yeah, he'll go find the unit, and then his resources goes and gets the morning reports. Question? Another question?
Do you have any interest in going over there to see where all this happened?
Well, you know, I lived in Germany off and on during my college years, and but I did not know this story then. And so now I want to go back. Yeah, I'd like to go back and visit all those map points. That, by the way, that custom map, I designed it, but she produced it. It was really a challenge. It's an amazing thing to try to make your own map that shows nothing else besides what you want.
Good job, Lisa.
Well, folks, if that's it, don't forget to smell the 4711 on the way out the door.
Great job.